said he won't stick to your notes. I said I have to stick to the notes because there's some important things that have to be relayed here. But as I listened to Mark talk about things, what Mark failed to tell you about the cuckoo clock arrangement, that was evolution at its finest. Because you see, we would stand there and turn this crank, and it was an argument, who's going to stand and turn this crank because we're winding up this wet membrane? Well, I don't want to do it. You want to do it? No. So next thing you know, we have a ratchet wrench stuck on the end, and we put a weight on it. So you have a constant lever, and you have constant torque, but that only lasted for a few seconds. Brian comes up, cuckoo clock. So we're cuckoo clock. But the brilliance of that whole idea, the reason why, had nothing to do with winding up membrane. We could have stood there, but we had other things to do. What you don't realize is Brian Fall taught Jimi Hendrix how to play Purple Haze. you don't. The reason why we had to have that thing turning the crank is because we were perfecting me on the electric shears. It went high to low. It went. Brian picks up the air gun and goes. So I was going to stick to a lot.
Stick to your notes.
I should stick to my notes. Well, listen. The other thing that's really, really important here is this celebration would not have been complete if we didn't recognize two very, very, very special people. Nancy Newell, Brian Newell, I know. Bob and Lois Fall, Brian's parents, were two of the finest people you will have ever met. God knows, when I stuck my truck in a mud hole up on American Mountain and I couldn't repair it because my knee was apart, Brian and his dad went up there, got the truck, and repaired the front end for me. And just special, special people. Anyhow, I had to say that. I'm sure they're looking down right now with pride at what Brian has created. In some cases, this is the American dream, right? But anyhow, so I need to say this one disclaimer. None of the comments that I make tonight have anything to do with management, past, present, or future.
They're not here.
So, as Joe pointed out, we started out as AMF Juno, went to commercial sharing, and please hold the sheep jokes till later. My entire career was all filled with sheep jokes because of commercial sharing. Went to commercial Intertech, 3M, Juno Corporated 3M, and most recently Solventum. But don't let any of these comments, you'll get over it, trust me. Because you'll be here 40 years from now and
Go back to your first
management won't care.
Go back to your first Kev. Go back to your first paragraph.
Okay. Yeah, this is kind of important because if at the beginning of this evening you don't believe in God, or perhaps are skeptical of the miracles that He gives us every day, by the end of this discussion you may have a change of heart. Mainly because only God knows how the hell Brian or any of us could have made a lifelong career working at a filter factory. And most importantly, kept our sanity. So, that's important because I know this. Along my career, Brian was always there, and I know that I had God on my side either, because a lot of times it's the only reason why we got out of some of the shit that we got into. So while we're talking about management, and I know Joe touched on it, but this was originally my dad's steakhouse. We used to enter over there, you went into the bar, and usually there were a couple of cocked VPs from Cuno sitting there with all kinds of floozies hanging over them. And so I was going to ask everybody, can I see a show of hands of how many people met their future, past, or present wives here? And I think it's pretty much, let's get a show of hands. Come on, show of hands. Craig and Kim, Danny, Darlene, Brian and Nancy.
Crystal and John.
Yep. So, I mean, but the reason why, you think about it, folks, when we started Cuno, Zetaport, we used to work 12, 16-hour days. There was a time, one time, I found a check in my glove box for $1,200. that I had cash that was 2 or 3 months old. Because all we did was we worked 7 days a week trying to get membrane running. You think that's easy to do now. Back then, it was Zetapor for a reason, 2 O's. P-O-O-R. You know, honestly, I was going to tell the story about, and Mark, you'll know this, Hans Lang. One day I walked through the maintenance department, there's a shaft, a box with a shaft in it, it's about 20 feet long. I said to the guy at a maintenance, what's this shaft for? He said, oh, it's a new propeller shaft for Hans Lang's Hatteras, 53-foot Hatteras yacht. So they spent money on that. They didn't spend money on things like buying us a motor, a rewind motor. In any event, so there were a bunch of people. Tom York, Hans Lang, Jack Mummer. Here's a good one, Ron Zabrowski. Ron Zabrowski had a $200 shirt that was ruined because somebody spilled a glass of wine on his shirt. And we were all down in the front office because we supposedly orchestrated it over in that bar over there. Paul Blotny and I laughed at it, Maureen. We laughed, but Cindy went like this, watch this, and she threw it on him, and next thing you know, we're down at the front office. But that was, you know, in the 80s, that was the, you know, win friends and influence people, Gail Carnegie form of management. You know, the beatings will increase until morale improves. And we need to recognize a few other people. Brian, you'll remember some of these people. George Urosevich, Harvey Stedley, Mike Neuroth, John Simpson, David Johnston, all the various consultants that were all brought in. And what they would do is they'd come down and they would ask me and Brian and Mark, how do you make membrane? And we would tell them on a piece of paper or something. They'd go to front office and say, this is what we need to be doing. Well, we've been saying it for a year, they wouldn't do it. But they pay these people, you know, money to do this. And Joe, were you there today that John Simpson called us all into his office?
Yeah.
And he says, you people suck. And he says, if you don't improve things, you'll be fired. And I said to him, John, you won't have to fire me, because if things continue like this, I'll quit. Then he comes up to my office and he has the balls to say to me, that's exactly the fire I made. I looked at him and God strike me dead. I said to him, John, I've been called worse things by better people than you. Drag your ass out of here. Okay? But that's not the only thing. Things were different. So as we were starting up membrane, not only did we have the take-up thing, but one day we're trying to, it's been working to set the thing up for 2 days. Up above us, we knew about it, but you didn't think about it. There were these several 100-gallon plastic tanks that the test department used to pump water in and out of against the head pressure. So we're just about ready to turn the crank, and we're open this in, and we're doing it. All of a sudden, when the tank splits and water comes, it's pouring down. Holy shit, are we gonna stop? Nah. Ryan said, hold on. He runs. He comes back with this umbrella that's about this big. It's like, so if you don't believe in God, where he found that umbrella, I have no idea. We had 3 or 4 umbrellas. We continued to take up membrane, but that was state of the art back then. Another name that some of you will remember. So we couldn't dry membrane. We could make wet membrane. We couldn't dry it. So one night, Brian and I worked until about 10 o'clock at night. We tried all kinds of things, duct tape, you know, everything you could try. Well, we finally made a little roll, maybe about 10 feet. Bob Irons comes in the morning. He was the head of VP of engineering. He says 4 words to us after we busted our ass all night. He says, that's Yankee ingenuity. That was the kind of management we had back then. I suspect things have changed a lot since then. Maybe not. I don't know. So let's see, what else did I just want to talk to you about? Okay. So yeah, 3M didn't get to experience my dad's. My dad was where it all happened. All the decision making was made over in that bar over there. Hold on. Is it? Yeah. Jacoby's my dad's, yeah. But realistically, I'm here tonight for one simple reason. I need to bring this whole thing full circle. Something that started in 1974 in a college lab where I met Brian Fall for the first time. Basically, we went to college together. We did pretty much everything together. We were lab partners, quickly became inseparable and best buddies. brothers from another mother, right? When you fast forward 4 years of college and countless shenanigans, trust me, as Joe replied, if there were cell phones alive back then, we would not be, you would be reading about us down in the local jail. The things that used to go on. But we had fun. We had fun. And a lot of other people's expenses. But
Jackie Simpson?
what's that?
Jackie Simpson?
Jackie Simpson, yes. But anyhow, but things were different back in 1979, right? Gas prices were through the roof. Hold on. What happens when you got to print it so big you can... The economy was in shambles, high inflation, and higher mortgage rates. The Middle East was one camel joke away from World War III, and our country was being led by, as Joe said, a peanut farmer. Honestly, are things much different today? No. But let's get back to the story. So, thanks to a family connection, I got a job in 1980 working at AMF Juneau in the engineering laboratory. John Scalia, where's John? John Scalia was one of my first group leaders, my boss, and at the end of the day, like, I'm still working on what I was working on. He says, Kevin, it's time to go home. I said, I'm not finished. I was used to just doing that's what you did. And he said, no, you go home. You come in tomorrow, you pick it up where you started. But thanks to the guy named Frank Oceanic, who some of you know, Walt and John remember Frank Oceanic over in purchasing. He was my cousin, so he got me a job. Next thing you know, Dick Babineau comes to me in 1980 and says, you have anybody you know that needs a job and is willing to work with you? Next thing you know, Brian's hired. That was May of 1980. And the thing that I wanted to bring up was that 100% chrome plate of that Opel Kadett, they had to be put on hold. Brian had an Opel Kadett that he inherited from his brother. He was working at a plating company. He had every part of that thing was slowly being chrome or cadmium or nickel, and he would instruct me, if you want a really good chrome finish, it's copper, nickel, cadmium, whatever. He can tell you about that. So Brian had to put on hold the chroming of his Opel Kadett to come and help us with it. So what else do I have to say? Oh, another funny story. It wasn't that funny. I gotta find her. Don't get old. Your hearing goes, your eyesight goes. Okay, so this is the coup de grace. I told you about how the time that we got chewed out for throwing wine on Ron Zabrowski's shirt. So I was making membrane, and Brian went off to help start making cartridges. Okay, we were still developing. And we'd hired some people to help actually assemble the cartridges. And they come to Brian and they tell him, Brian, you gotta have a way to serialize these things, keep track of them. They didn't tell you how to do it. They didn't tell you what to do with it or how to do it. So Brian creates a system. And they're hand etching the cartridges with lot number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, cartridges 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Well, Don Meisling, I thought you might be here, made a mistake. And he used the same number on 2 of the cartridges. So Brian, clever as he is, goes and says, well, Don, these are just for our testing. We're going to just label them A and B. So this is the funny part, and I have to read this part. Now remember, we're still in the age of quality control. Quality assurance was only being practiced by advanced operations of people who had previously been known for crashing planes into ships. Joe will appreciate that. But honestly, so QA finds out, QC finds out about this, all hell's. Brian gets called down to the front office. How could you have done this? How could all kinds of threats. Well, 40 years later, Brian's here, they're not. The part of that story that you need to know is, I don't remember the time frame. It wasn't that long afterwards. It might have been, but I don't think it was. Next thing you know, he gets a call from the vice president. We had this idea from somebody out along the corporate food chain. Let's change the grade of this to that. And I want you to hand etch those cartridges. So Brian is living proof that you can tell a VP where to stick something. He'll still be here 40 years later, because that's what he basically did. All right, so, yeah, so listen, so we're going to jump right in. So, I want to present something. So, back in the day, when Juno Engineering evolved into AMF Juno, when one of the big founding fathers would retire, all the people that dutifully kissed that person's ass over the years would present them with an award. Right? Mark, you probably sat through some of those retiring parties. So we're here to give Brian, here, you can pull this out of here, Brian. All joking aside, all of those high-paid people didn't do a nickel's worth of work to deserve what they were given, what Brian did. So, it's fitting tonight that Brian now owns the last remaining golden Juno filter house.
All right.
You have to pick your own lampshade. I didn't want to send you. You know, for years I sat and I watched all these people that sat in the front office tell everybody how they should be doing stuff, while the people in the trenches were working with them. Honestly, I'm proud of the career that Brian forged. You know, we should all be very, very proud of it. And I need to read this to you. Other than I'll stop. All right. So, give me a second. So that's from all of the Juno Engineering, all of the AMF Juno. That's thank you, Brian, for doing what you did. This is from me.
Must be a shade from the
It's fitting tonight that we gave Brian that award. That's a bottle of Tennessee Sippin' whiskey, because there's an exact duplicate of that lamp sitting in our den, where when I pull out the Tennessee Sippin' whiskey, I sit there and I reflect back on all the great times. But most importantly, I reflect back on a brother who pulled my ass out of the fire more times than I can tell you. I had the attitude, you want to do that? Yeah, we can do that. We can figure that out. Yeah. Some of you have probably seen that. Brian was always the type, how am I going to get us out of this thing? How am I going to make that work? And Brian, that's what he did. And thanks to Brian, a lot of us have had a great career. I wish you luck in the future, brother. God bless.